Welcome to this edition of CBN News Weekend. I'm Lori Johnson. Human trafficking is on the rise in Europe. Each year, dozens of women from poor families are lured to the West for sham marriages in order for their so-called husbands to gain entry and work in the European Union. As Charlene Aaron reports, many of the women are left with nothing or forced into prostitution.
Klara Belagova grew up in Slovakia in a poor gypsy settlement. At 18, she left home for Great Britain to marry a man she had never met. The arranged marriage would allow the Pakistani bridegroom to live and work legally in Europe. Upon her arrival in the UK, the man took her passport and other documents, leaving her with nothing.
He didn't let me out at any time. He told me it was not possible to go out there. He always said that.
Then Belagova's husband-to-be dumped her, all alone. Each year, scores of women like Belagova are lured to the West for marriage shams, something that's on the rise as Britain tightens its borders and lawmakers urge for tougher immigration laws. Authorities say the prospective bridegrooms are often Asian or African, living in the EU illegally or on short-term visas. The men promise jobs, money, and a better life abroad, all so they can stay in the country without fear of deportation. Most brides get paid for trips to countries like Britain, Ireland, and Germany, not realizing it's all a scam until they arrive. They're often held captive until the signing of their marriage papers. Many end up trapped without money in a foreign country, or worse, used for sex and drug trafficking.
The going rate for a female is between £3,000 and £4,000, of which the female will see virtually none of that. So that would be the money that we think has changed hands.
Many of the brides end up in Britain.
We have information that there are in the Rochdale area upwards of 400 sham marriages. I think it's important to say that that doesn't mean there are 400 trafficked victims, but certainly of those 400, some will have been trafficked into the country illegally.
Alan Doherty from the charity Hope for Justice wants to help these women. He says poverty and fear drive them to such desperation.
The victim doesn't want to do this, but feels they've got no way out. So they will go into the sham marriage thinking that they've got no choice. And actually, where people argue and say, no, I don't want to do this, that's where perhaps the trafficker will use other means of control. And that's where threats against themselves or their family back home are used. And that's a very powerful way of controlling somebody. If you think that your family back home, that the house is going to be set on fire or people are going to be attacked and injured, it's a massive means of controlling you, and people tend to go along with what the trafficker wants them to do.
Belagova eventually returned to her home in Slovakia, but she says she's willing to take her chances again for a shot at a more prosperous life.
It was 100 times better for me in England. It's not good at all for me here. I'd like to go back to that city.
Decisions like that make the British crackdown on this type of human trafficking all the more difficult. Charlene Aaron, CBN News.
In India, people are doing whatever they can to stay cool as temperatures soar during a deadly heat wave. It's contributed to the deaths of at least 1,400 people. Officials are warning people to stay out of the sun, cover their heads, and drink water. Forecasters say the high temperatures will continue for several more days. CBN Disaster Relief is on the ground in India providing assistance. To see what the team is doing, log on to cbnnews.com. Well, it's been a month since that devastating earthquake hit Nepal. Hundreds of thousands of Nepalis are still without homes and in need of other aid. CBN Disaster Relief is still on the scene to help the survivors, but now there's another growing concern: protecting Nepal's children. Gary Lane has the story from Kathmandu.
1 month after the earthquake, Nepali homes are still in ruins and lives are shattered.
15 kilometers away from Kathmandu, people are starting to starving, and they are begging for the help.
CBN humanitarian and disaster relief teams are still in country, traveling long distances under difficult conditions to bring food, blankets, tarps, water, and other items to save Nepali lives. So far, they've delivered more than 100 tons. And after all the tarps are distributed and the tents and the food, other items to help the people in the short term, there will be long-term needs. These communities will have to be rebuilt brick by brick. But it's just not building them by bricks. It's rebuilding lives. Tens of thousands of people have lost loved ones and all their possessions. Many are traumatized. Some still fear another big earthquake. Now the safety of Nepal's children is an urgent concern. Some kids have been seen traveling with strangers, and that raises fears of human trafficking. Christian groups sponsor homes like this one in Kathmandu to get kids off the street. But in the aftermath of the earthquake, with more than 8,000 dead and thousands missing, countless more parentless and impoverished children are expected to take to the streets.
Definitely there will be lots of homeless children in future. As it was before, it will be more.
Concerns about child trafficking caused the Nepali government to place a moratorium on international adoptions for at least the next 3 months. In the long term, the government will face greater pressure to house orphaned and homeless children. For now, CBN is delivering immediate relief and promising to help rebuild Nepali communities and lives in the days to come. Gary Lane, CBN News, Kathmandu, Nepal.
Bible translation is thriving around the world despite many challenges. A recent report by the United Bible Society shows that in 2014, more than 1 billion people gained access to the Bible for the first time. 51 new Bible translations launched last year in languages spoken by more than 1.3 billion people, including 1.2 billion Chinese speakers and 146 million speakers of other languages. Despite the persecution of Christians in Nigeria by Boko Haram, the Nigerian Bible Society launched 4 new Bible translations. And in Liberia, the nation hardest hit by Ebola, 2 new translations were launched in languages spoken by nearly 1 million people. Donald Trump is thinking about running for president again, but unlike the past when he's talked about it, this time he's actually showing some signs that he's serious. David Brody spoke with the Donald on one of Trump's recent trips to Iowa.
Wherever he goes, Donald Trump attracts a crowd.
These are hard-working people that love the country. That's what the people of Iowa are.
Here in Des Moines, Iowa, fans stand in line, ready to meet the successful businessman who may soon be a candidate for president. He knows the political importance of this state and has made a number of visits.
Iowa, your impressions, and what are you feeling out there with the crowds that you're seeing?
Well, we're getting great crowds. As you know, we're getting the biggest crowds by far. We're getting standing ovations because I'm not a politician. I tell it like it is, and people have to hear it.
Trump has flirted with presidential runs before, but this time he's organizing in the early primary states. His top guy is Chuck Laudner, who helped Rick Santorum win in Iowa 4 years ago.
We have a great team of people. They're hardworking. They believe in my message, and my message is make America great again. We have to make America rich again and make America great again.
If he gets into the race, you could see him among the heavy hitters. That's because polls place him in the top 10 presidential candidates, which would land him a spot in the first debate. Yet the mainstream media and even some conservatives don't take him seriously.
For people that don't want to take you serious, what's your answer to them?
A lot of people don't think I'm running. That's where the not serious is concerned only. And that's easily answered, and that'll be answered in the month of June, and people will be surprised.
So what is it exactly that attracts conservatives to him?
I like somebody who's actually not a politician, somebody who's actually had a paycheck, made a paycheck, employed people, built something.
He's a celebrity. He attracts people to the political arena that aren't interested in political stuff. He promotes conservative principles. And he's fun and forceful.
That force showed up often during our interview. From what he thinks of Barack Obama.
We have a president that's incompetent, doesn't know what he's doing.
To immigration.
Nobody can build a fence like me, David. You know that. I built great buildings all over the world. There's nobody can build a fence, and I would have Mexico pay for it, believe me. They will pay for it.
And even on representing persecuted Christians around the world.
Believe me, if I run and I win, I will be the greatest representative of the Christians that they've had in a long time.
Despite all the talk and love from some within the GOP base, his strong ego can be a turnoff for some.
Today, I'm very
proud of myself.
His negativity ratings are high, which would be a challenge, but Trump says if he runs, people will get to know a different side of him.
I have a big heart. You know, I think you have to. You have to take care of people. And I do have a big heart. I have great relationships with people when they know me. A lot of people don't like me, but those are the people that don't know me.
We may indeed get more of an up-close look at Donald Trump, finally, in 2016. David Brody, CBN News, in Des Moines, Iowa.
Coming up, he says Christian beliefs are on the verge of being labeled as hate speech. Hear what motivates Republican Marco Rubio in his quest to become the next president of the United States. Sophisticated criminals used an online service run by the IRS to steal personal tax information from more than 100,000 taxpayers. The thieves got into the online system where taxpayers can get tax returns and other filings from previous years. The IRS says the thieves are organized crime syndicates. Utah Republican Senator Orrin Hatch blasted the IRS for being vulnerable to such an attack. He said the tax agency has been warned repeatedly by top government watchdogs that its data security systems aren't good enough against the growing threats from international hackers and data thieves. In 2008, a young Democrat named Barack Obama captured the White House. Now, nearly 8 years later, another up-and-coming politician has a chance to take a similar path. This time, he's a Republican, and his name is Marco Rubio. David Brody brings us this look at the Florida senator's views on his faith, his family, and his future plans.
Senator Marco Rubio.
Florida Senator Marco Rubio sees Iowa as the first stop on his road to the White House. It's the ultimate American dream, and for this 43-year-old, the future is now.
I have been told by some people, you know, why don't you wait? You know, you could be the candidate of the future. And my answer is, well, that's good news because this election's in the future.
And that philosophy will be the centerpiece of his presidential run, with the campaign theme, A New American Century.
We are engaged in a massive global competition for investment and for innovation, and we are falling behind because our government has policies that are holding us back.
Rubio supporters see him as an American success story. Raised in a Spanish-speaking home to Cuban-born parents, he grew up as part of the working class. After arriving in America, both parents worked hard. Their rich family spirit made up for any financial shortcomings. A lesson that sticks with him to this day.
First of all, the family is the original cell of society. In essence, it is the first and most important government. It's the first church. The family is the singular most important institution in society. It existed before government. It existed before laws.
A strong faith is also key. He grew up Roman Catholic, though at one point the family tried Mormonism. Rubio tells me that didn't feel right.
As I got more theologically aware and more engaged in learning about Catholicism, I wanted to go back, and so we did.
As a young adult, Rubio admits he fell away from his faith, so his wife started attending a Baptist church. They went there for a number of years, but eventually Rubio felt a tug back to his Catholic roots.
In an ironic way, the more I learned about the written word, the more I fell in love with the Roman Catholic teachings. And we've ended up going back to that church. And so today we're in a place where we're Roman Catholics, fully aligned with the theology and the magisterium, the teaching authority of the church, but also with a tremendous appreciation for and often interaction with our brothers and sisters in Christ who attend other denominations.
Today, his deep faith drives public policy decisions on social issues, like traditional marriage.
We are at the water's edge of the argument that mainstream Christian teaching is hate speech. Because today we've reached a point in our society where if you do not support same-sex marriage, you are labeled a homophobe and a hater. So what's the next step after that? After they've done going after individuals, the next step is to argue that the teachings of mainstream Christianity, the Catechism of the Catholic Church, is hate speech. And that's a real and present danger.
And Rubio says he's ready to face danger, not just here, but around the world.
You don't want to be engaged in every conflict on the planet. We're not the world's policeman. But I question what would happen in the alternative. If America doesn't lead, for example, what happens? Well, what happens is chaos.
His positions and early standing in the polls put Rubio in a good position, even this early in the race. His backers like a general election scenario of a young Marco Rubio versus Hillary Clinton, who's been around a while. He does face some challenges, though, with the base, specifically his work with Democrats on comprehensive immigration reform. It's something that he knew could hurt his chances of becoming president when we discussed this issue 2 years ago.
It's a political reality of what could potentially happen.
Well, the day I start making decisions around here with the mind towards what other office I want to run for, I'll no longer be very effective.
Another challenge? His latest tax plan, which has some conservatives complaining that he would leave tax rates too high. But challenges are nothing new to Rubio. Politically, he defeated former Florida Governor Charlie Crist in 2010 to win his Senate seat. Personally, he rose to the challenge when one day he suddenly came to the rescue of his son.
I walk outside and I turn to the left and I look in the pool and Dominic is floating at the top face down. And you can just imagine how horrifying that was. And so I jumped in, I pulled him out. He immediately started crying, obviously, threw up all the water he had swallowed and everything was fine. But, if to this day, it tortures me to think if I had been in the shower or anything else, what would have happened there. It was just, God's hand that protected him.
That moment crystallized the importance of family in his life.
One day I will no longer be in politics. One day I will no longer be a senator or a president or anything else. But I will always be a father and I will always be a husband.
As for president, well, he'll leave that up to the American people. Oh, and Almighty God.
You ready for the slings and arrows? It's coming. It's a whole different ballgame,
Yeah. So ultimately my view of it is you go out, you do the very best you can, and ultimately it's going to turn out the way voters and God decide.
David Brody, CBN News, in Des Moines, Iowa.
And you can follow David Brody to get the latest in political news on social media and his blog, The Brody File.
Jamie Watts is my hero. She is the most positive, upbeat, generous, caring person I have ever met in my life.
Up next, technically she's disabled, but her friends say there's nothing she can't do. Why Jamie Watts is an inspiration to so many people. More than a third of adults in the U.S. suffer from a dangerous combination of medical problems that could put their health at risk as they get older, according to new research. The condition is called metabolic syndrome. It includes high blood pressure, problems with cholesterol, increased levels of blood sugar, and a waistline that's too big. And that combination raises the risk of heart disease and diabetes. Health Day News reports that one of the study's authors says the sheer number of people with these problems could place a huge burden on America's healthcare system in the future. We'll say the word runner, and you might think of Olympians like Usain Bolt or Jackie Joyner-Kersee. But most of the 65.5 million people who call themselves runners don't stand out, win gold, or break any records. John Jessup found one inspirational athlete, proving it can be a sport for anyone.
Washington, D.C., a place known for running and not just for public office. Visit the city and you'll see people pounding the pavement at all times of the day.
I went to the gym to get into shape, to do better for myself.
Jamie Watts never set out to be a runner.
After training about 6 months in the gym, I said, we have a lot of those races here in the D.C. area. They're happening all the time. I bet one of those would be really fun to do.
So she signed up for her first race in 2012.
And so then I did one and another and another.
And quickly got hooked.
And I amassed this incredible, amazing group of running friends, and they just encouraged me along the way.
Despite her enthusiasm, she's not your typical runner. Born with cerebral palsy, Jamie has her own unique stride.
Disability, just like everything else, is just a life experience. And it's a cultural way that you view the world around you.
Easy to spot in a crowd, she tends to invite cheers from onlookers and fellow runners.
And you're out there and you're thinking, oh, my leg is sore, and then you see somebody like her. She's very inspirational.
On her last birthday, Jamie set out to run 34 races in her 34th year. To finish the course before it closed, she started 2 hours before anyone else. CBN News was there as she crossed the finish line and met her goal.
This is your first 10-miler.
It is my first 10-miler.
How are you feeling?
I feel amazing. I feel like I could do anything.
Her best friend Katie flew in from Texas to cheer her on.
Jamie Watts is my hero. She is the most positive, upbeat, generous, caring person I have ever met in my life.
It's part of her professional life too, working to help people with disabilities find jobs.
In no way would I ever attempt to speak for all people with disabilities. I don't, right? But if I can change the way that one person interacts or thinks about interacting with people with disabilities, that's a fantastic thing.
Katie's convinced there's nothing Jamie can't do.
She and I went to Ecuador this past summer, and she climbed a volcano with a smile on her face the whole time. She does not let anything stop her or slow her down.
And Jamie, who's gained more confidence as a runner, believes that too.
I have learned that I can do anything that I set my mind to.
While she may never win first place, Jamie's proof that certain runners do stand out, like the elite racers who lead the pack, those who play to the crowd,
You were on the news this morning.
and others like Jamie, who simply inspire.
Everybody in! Everybody in!
John Jessup, CBN News, Washington.
Operation Blessing is on the ground in San Marcos, Texas, helping with recovery efforts in one of the hardest hit flooded areas. Teams are working with local pastors to help residents and assist with cleanup. Rhonda Martinez says that the water that poured into her home was so strong, it tore the tiles off the floor in a matter of minutes.
We weren't able to evacuate the home. We tried, we couldn't. We did get rescued with the city of San Marcos. There was about 3 inches of mud in our home once we got there. Windows had been broken from the water.
Some of her neighbors are still missing. Operation Blessing encouraged Rhonda with prayer and gave her gift cards so she and her family could buy much-needed personal items. Well, that's all for this hour of CBN News Weekend. You can find more of our exclusive coverage of the issues you care most about at cbnnews.com. And stay up to date with CBN News through Facebook and Twitter. We hope you'll join us again next time. Have a wonderful weekend.